Today I wanted to discuss Rush, one of my favorite bands and very influential on me. I didn't initially come to them. I didn't like them very much until I got into college, frankly. They were always around, frankly. Growing up in the Midwest, you can't escape Rush. It's pretty much, especially on the radio airplay, things from Permanent Waves and Moving Pictures, both constant um, airplay on the radios. So I didn't really have to seek them out. They found me. This is sort of like Led Zeppelin. Canadian Led Zeppelin. Anyways, and to, you know, signify them talking about something Canadian, I'm wearing a Canadian sport coat here. And there's always a reason for whatever the hell I'm wearing. Anyways, a lot of Rush news lately, and I'm not gonna fanboy this. I don't do that. I sort of talk about it from a production standpoint and as a major influence on me. And I didn't appreciate them at first. I didn't really like, in particular, Tom Sawyer, which was this song off of Moving Pictures that you could not get away from. It was everywhere, and actually a bandmate of mine, we had a duo called ABL, the Antibiotic Legumes, said that it was partially to cheese me off, said it was my theme song. Well, I don't march to anybody's theme song, which is exactly what Tom Sawyer, the character in Tom Sawyer, would act like too. Not the Mark Twain Tom Sawyer, but the Rush version of Tom Sawyer. Mine's not for rent. And it's kind of the same thing for me. I'm not like some super fan, even though that's probably the band I listen to the most. And Rush and I'd say Zappa and Miles Davis have a greater influence on me. But who I listen to the most is Rush. And they had stopped playing for a while because their beloved and, ultra influential drummer Neil Peart had died, and everybody pretty much assumed, well, that he is Rush. And even though he was the back line, he was certainly the front man of the band, writing the lyrics, and kind of the philosopher in chief of the band, but also the drummer. And drummers are also kind of a de facto arranger. They have a tremendous amount of power within a band that people don't necessarily think. So they think, well, how do you replace him? Well, you don't. And they did the right thing by getting Anika Nilles. And now they're going on tour. And they've also announced that they're getting a keyboard player, Lauren Gold. All this is good. I think Geddy and Alex deserve to be able to make and play music again. Just recently, though, they did say, hey, we're jamming. Maybe we will record something in the future, new material. Okay, good, interesting. What I wanted to talk about is a little bit of what does that mean? Anika Nilles, really interesting drummer, German, hyper technical but incredibly musical. Just some people have a tremendous amount of flow and ideas, and she seems to be that sort. And I appreciate that just because, particularly on guitar, I can just go and go and go. I don't have to think about it. I just draw on experience and knowledge and background. I started in classical music and other things. So I'm drawing on that when I'm playing guitar. Anika Nilles, she's a composer in and of herself, but who happens to be an exceptional drummer. It's an interesting thing. Some things you're going to find that are different. She's a very busy drummer, but you don't necessarily notice it because it's so seamless and flowing. She's not as sharp and spiky and staccato as Neil Peart would be. She also isn't necessarily as funny as Neil Peart. Neil Peart sense of humor, and everybody's sense of humor is different, so it's going to be different anyways. But he would throw in disco beats, cool and remote like Dancing Girls, and he starts throwing in a little, club beat in there. Hilarious. I don't know how cheeky Anika is going to be, and nobody's going to know until you hear it, man. But it's going to be different. Her sense of timing and this and that. Obviously, I think she can replicate anything that Neil Peart did on a technical standpoint, but they're going to have a little different phrasing. She's got a smoother jazz fusion vibe, where he is very staccato. And that rock drummer thing. He didn't really have the world's greatest flow. He was almost like somebody who would bring in chapters of as a storyteller. And Anika Nilles, one thing that you're going to notice different with her is she uses something called a clap stack. I just hit one right there. Back in Neil Peart's day, people weren't really using them. And Anika Nilles, who's been around for over a decade now, was an early adopter in these things. And what they are is just a bunch of cymbals stacked on top of each other. It sounds a little bit like a clap. It gives a kind of a kicking a garbage can down the street kind of sound, but it has a very short decay. Instead, Neil Peart would use a lot of China cymbals and stuff like that. Nilles uses a clap stack, which has just different qualities. You're going to hear this in the music, and it's going to be different. Just like Lauren Gold as a keyboardist, Geddy Lee has a very distinctive kind of way of playing keyboards, and I'm certain Lauren Gold will be able to ape that. He's built a long touring career as a professional keyboardist. He'll be able to do anything Geddy can do as a keyboardist. I don't have any question about that. But it's different. The question is, how much writing say would they have if they started producing new music? If they're just jamming in a room, if everybody's in the room, that means the keyboardist has, a part that they will have interest in getting on the finished mix. Whereas in the past, it's been a power trio. And in some ways, Neil Peart had a little more power because he was also the lyricist. Geddy, as the vocalist and keyboardist and singer, also had maybe... So everybody makes this big deal out of, well, did Alex get his share or get his due? Because Alex kind of sort of, even though he very much asserts himself in a lot of the music, sometimes he kind of took a step backwards or a step receding in the mix. Just like this latest Grace Under Pressure reissue that they're doing. It's the 40th anniversary album. They had Terry Brown, who had mixed things like Permanent Waves and Moving Pictures and Signals. And they, for the 40th anniversary, people are wondering, okay, let's do a little bit of fan service and see what would have it sounded like had Terry Brown remixed the thing. And, I think you can go and relitigate the past, and it's nice and fun for the fans to hear a different version. And of course, a new mix is going to have more clarity, because why do it without that? But really, Grace Under Pressure was a transformative album for the band. They were really still trying to stay alive in the new wave sense. So there's a lot of synthesizers. Crunchy guitars were not as big a part, and there was a lot of chorus and cleanness on the guitars. And so it kind of, the keyboards and the guitars would meld together. This Terry Brown mix separates the keyboards from the guitars, and I think that partially is not as successful as the original mix, because it was that intermix that's going on. From a compositional standpoint, that's a really, if you're going to do a weave, and I'm a fabric guy, I'm a clothes horse, this stuff. partially because it's an analog for civilization, the way fabrics are woven together, also the way music is woven together. And these are compositional ideas. So to sort of pull the threads out between the two and put the keyboards on one side and put the guitar on the other side, make it really obvious. Yeah, it might be interesting, but I'm going to go back to the original mix time and time again. That's what I want to hear. But, it's great. Creates work for Terry Brown. You get to play a little bit of a Rashomon kind of what if Terry Brown had mixed that album, because he didn't. They would have kept working with him, I think. It's just they wanted to do more synthesizers, and at the time he wasn't as well versed in working with MIDI synchronization and that sort of thing, which you need for incorporating synthesizers. It's gonna be so. There's all that, and there's a lot of talking about mix and stuff. What's my favorite sounding Rush album? Here we go. This Test for Echo, and mixed by one of the world's greatest mixers, and it was recorded at Bear Sound too. By the way, you can buy Bear Sound. Anybody has a couple $1 million floating around should buy that studio because it kicks butt. But this is a fantastic mix, and it has a couple of their best songs. I think Test for Echo and I think Driven are two of their very best songs they ever recorded. And it's on this album. Not always that well liked. And that's the whole thing. When you have a band that's had a 50-year career, you're going to have different eras and different sorts of things. For me, that's what Grace Under Pressure means. That is an era, and they were trying to fit into this new wave thing. And so there is a sort of artistic necessity, because when you're a band that's successful, you're supporting an entire village that supports you as well. There's your crew, there's the people who mix your albums, there's the people who promote your things, and do your artwork and concept things and all sorts of other things, and music videos back at the time and all that sort of stuff. So if you want to stay alive and you're doing a big production which is supporting a village of other creative people who are supporting your effort as a band. And Rush is more than a band. For some people, it's an institution. It's like a series of philosophy and artistic discussions. And people, because of that, and there's epistemologies that go on with this. To me, the original has that urgency to it. Is like, hey, we need to incorporate synthesizers if we want to live on the radio anymore. And they were right. And, limited success to it, but, it kept them going. And you don't always have to be at the top of the charts. You just have to be doing something that people find persuasive and, or at least engaging. I think doing this new tour will be interesting to them. The question, certainly Anika Nilles will bring things that you've never heard before, and capabilities. Her polyrhythms and rudimental chops are off the scale. As somebody who works at drums, even though, guitar, particularly electric guitar, is my best instrument. I play a lot of things from violin and viola to saxophone, and drums I've been rapidly progressing. I keep getting better all the time, especially rudimental. I've been working on it. She's astonishing. I will never be that good at the drums. I'm an interesting drummer, but I don't have that same kind of facility. She can give you 10 different ways of doing something. I can give you 2. 2's actually pretty good. I'm happy when I can do 2 different ways of doing something on the drums. But if somebody could just go for day, and maybe she could go for 10 or 15 days, she'd incorporate 100,000 different things. The permutations are endless. And it's that flow. I think it's going to open up their music in different ways. And I wonder if being such an old act, because this is the, the, the 50, Rush at 50 tour, you know, they have nothing to prove. So I'd like to see them do some just gangbusters instrumentals. Because they have lost their lyricist in Neil Peart, and it's going to be something different. Not that Geddy can't do lyrics himself, and Alex could help, and Anika, I don't know much about her, lyric writing or anything like that. Maybe you'll find out. You never know until you get into the situation. But what I've always liked about Rush is that they're a prog band that could write strong songs, and a tightness and a tautness and cutting out some of the fat, particularly in the 80s. And but also, I've been rediscovering some of the mid 70s to the late 70s stuff that they did, and the very indulgent. I think the world needs a large scale band that's capable of indulging themselves like Rush is. I'd love to hear some kick ass instrumentals from them. Start there, and maybe they'll have. I could see just an entire sidelong epic from them. I think that would be awesome. Will it be different when, especially if you have 4 different musicians having some sort of input? Yeah. Although I suspect that the keyboardist Lauren Gold he's a pro. He knows when to lay back. He knows this is a lucky gig, and it won't be his only gig. He's been playing with the Who and Chicago and total pop princess bands and whatnot. Dude's gonna have work forever. So he'll know when to lay back. But he can't push it. But the drummer Anika, she's central to Rush as an identity, and her different sort of asymmetrical chops, her polyrhythms, the level of flow that she has in that clap stack. I've even seen her using things like 16-inch hi-hats, just or 3 snare drums. Not as many toms as Neil Peart's giant kits, but way more snare drums. Clap stacks and snare drums both have they're like periods, question marks, and exclamation points from a rhythmic standpoint. They really make themselves be felt. Hi-hats have a different way about them as well. But when you have 3 different snare drums in your kit, that means you have 3 different ways of putting those sort of major punctuation marks. Whereas tons of toms, you do rolls, you do fills on them. Her fills are ridiculous. She has a way of doing absurd things that you don't really understand as being absurd unless you think about them. And you're like, what was that? That just went by so fast. So she has a way of incorporating hyper-technical ideas and just make them seamless, sort of like a bird call. You hear them off in the air. If you were to play a bird call on the guitar, and that's something I've done a lot of, is just try to play leads that would sound like something a red-winged blackbird would sing, just to try and come up with a different kind of a harmonic vocabulary. Some of it's microtonal. Those are all interesting things. I think that facility is going to change the band. It's going to be interesting, but also in an age where AI is taking over a lot. And I do think AI presents some really excellent opportunities for musicians. And there's some I probably will explore at some time. Right now, I'm just doing it all very human oriented because why not? Uh, I I want to set a human baseline for things. I think Rush is an important band in that they're capable of setting a human baseline. Um, where the band initially took off was with the lyric writing and drumming of Neil Peart, where he really explored the role of the individual, and the ability to have efficacy while being an individual and working within a larger civilization. Some people throw this in the whole Ayn Rand thing, and Neil somewhat rejected it. It was an interesting idea, but he took it other ways. You can actually go back to something like Confucianism, where it was sort of an ethical individual and their role and how they can have efficacy within the larger civilization. Those are all sorts of different things. I'm interested in seeing what Rush can do philosophically, even if they're just doing it as instrumentals, for showing where the individual can somehow have efficacy in the moment. Will they need a lyric writer now that they've lost their philosopher king? Maybe. Getting a new lease on life and exploring things again. I'd like to see how much of a sort of humanist ruckus they can make. Alex, Getty, good on you. I might even be in LA when they do their first concert.